The morning my own son quietly erased me from his life began with a single text message, one that shattered the last illusion I had about family. I suppose, at my age, people expect me to be soft, forgiving, easy to ignore. Maybe that's why what happened that morning felt like a slap I never saw coming. I was standing in my small kitchen in Eugene, a Reganme favorite place in the house, breathing in the faint smell of old coffee and lemon cleaner, when my phone buzzed. I didn't think anything of it. Matthew texted me often enough. Busy things, quick updates, the occasional photo of the house I bought for him and Emily. But that morning, when I tapped the screen, my heart seemed to fold in on itself. "You won't be joining us on the cruise, Mom. Emily prefers to keep it just family." Just family. Just family. I'm an old woman now, but I swear my hands had never trembled the way they did reading those 5 words. My only child. The boy I raised after my husband died, the boy I worked double shifts for, the boy I saved every extra penny for, the boy I trusted with everything. And suddenly, I wasn't family. My fingers went numb, my chest felt too tight. I must have stared at that glowing message for a whole minute before I could even breathe properly. The kitchen around Mimi's soft yellow curtains, the knickknacks I'd collected over 30 years, the little ceramic sparrow my husband bought me on our anniversary, blurred like someone had smeared the air. I typed one word back. Okay. A short word, but heavy enough to drown a lifetime of love. And inside my mind, over that single syllable, a different voice screamed. "So I'm good enough to buy your house, but not good enough to sit across from you at dinner? Not good enough to ride on the same damn ship? Not good enough to be seen as your mother anymore?" When I pressed send, I felt something break in me quietly, cleanly, like old porcelain snapping. The part of me that always smiled, always said don't worry about it, always smoothed things over, she died right there in my sunny kitchen. Then the phone buzzed again. "Emily. Always so polite. Always so pleasant. Always so calculated. Hope you understand. It's just simpler this way." Simpler. That word cut me deeper than anything Matthew wrote. I could practically hear her voice in those syllables, sweet, sugary, pretending to care while carving away pieces of my life. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. The silence in my house grew louder than any argument, wrapping itself around every photograph on the wall. Pictures of family vacations I paid for. Trips I funded. Smiles I bought with my sacrifices. The kitchen felt different suddenly, as though my home had turned into a museum of mistakes. The chairs I sanded and re-varnished myself. The curtains I sewed for their visits. The cookie jar I kept full because Matthew loved snickerdoodles when he was a kid. Everything in that room seemed to whisper the same thing. You gave too much. You trusted too easily. And they knew it. I sank into my old wooden chair. My husband carved it decades ago and stared out at the quiet Oregon morning. Sunlight made stripes across the tiled floor. Dust motes floated lazily through the air, unaware of the storm inside me. I thought of the housewarming party last spring. The house I bought for them, paid in full, no mortgage, no strings. I remembered Emily's wet, grateful eyes, her hands squeezing mine. "You'll always have a room here, Olivia. Always." She had said that with such sincerity that I believed her. Foolishly. Eagerly. Because mothers believe. We always believe. Now I saw that moment for what it truly was, a performance. A carefully crafted kindness that only lasted as long as my usefulness. The truth settled over me like a cold blanket. They didn't see me as a person anymore. I had become an accessory. A convenience. A walking retirement fund. I wanted to cry. God knows I did. But the tears didn't come. Maybe I'd spent them all long ago. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. Time moves differently when your heart breaks in slow motion. Then, something inside me shifted. It didn't rise with heat or anger. It came like a quiet flame, a small ember I hadn't felt in years.
Resolve. A firmness die Vergatten I possessed.
Because in that moment, sitting alone in my kitchen, phone still glowing with the cruelty of people I once loved, I realized something. They thought I would accept this. They thought I would stay small. They thought I would stay silent. They thought wrong. I picked up my phone again, not to text them, but to call the only person who always saw straight through me.
Martha.
My oldest friend. My anchor.
The one person who never made me feel like a burden.
When she answered, she didn't ask what was wrong. She just said, "I'm coming." And for the first time that morning, I exhaled. I didn't know then how far the betrayal went. I didn't know what Emily had been planning. I didn't know what Matthew had allowed her to do. But I did know one thing. I wasn't going to be their victim anymore. And that was the first real moment of freedom I'd felt in years. I don't know if it was instinct, fear, or simple exhaustion that pushed me to open my laptop after Martha left that evening. All I knew was that I couldn't sit still anymore. The silence in my house felt too heavy, too final, like it was waiting for me to acknowledge something I had spent years refusing to see. For most of my life, I trusted too quickly. Trusted Matthew because he was my son. Trusted Emily because she smiled sweetly and called me Mom with that soft voice of hers. Trusted every excuse they fed me. "Oh, shouldn't be dealing with online payments at your age. We're just trying to simplify things for you. Don't you worry about these little details, Olivia." I thought they cared. I thought they were helping. I thought family meant something. But that night, when I logged into my bank account, the world I built around those beliefs slowly crumbled. The first few transactions seemed normal. Groceries. Utilities. My charitable donations to the local animal shelter. But the deeper I scrolled, the more I felt the breath push out of my lungs. There were transfers. Small ones at first $78, $112, $95 labeled as home repairs or maintenance. Except there hadn't been any repairs.
Not in my house.
Not in theirs. At least none anyone told me about. I leaned closer to the screen, bringing the laptop almost to my nose. Old eyes, old truth. And there it was, tucked behind one of the transfer lines. Secondary authorized user, Emily R.
Gardner.
My daughter-in-law had quietly added herself to my account. Not as a helper. Not even as a cosigner.
As a person with full transfer power.
My fingers went cold against the laptop keys. I felt the same sensation I had felt when I buried my husband years ago, a sinking, plunging ache deep inside my ribs, as if something essential had been yanked out of me. But this wasn't loss. This was betrayal wearing my family name.
I clicked deeper into the login panels.
More activity appeared, slow siphoning. Little bits of my retirement savings moved into accounts I didn't recognize. Transactions to a card that wasn't mine, in Emily's name. The realization struck me with a force I wasn't prepared for. They'd been draining me long before the cruise message. Long before that cold text from Matthew. Long before I even suspected anything was wrong. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. I pushed my glasses up and rubbed my temples, but the numbers didn't change. They didn't lie.
They sat on my screen like digital fingerprints, evidence of quiet theft.
I whispered, barely hearing my own voice.
"Oh, Matthew, what have you let her do?"
My son. My bright, sweet boy who used to run to me with scraped knees. The boy who clung to my leg at his father's funeral. The boy who cried with his face buried in my sweater, begging me not to leave him. How did that child become a man who turned his eyes away while his wife cleaned out my accounts? My stomach twisted.
Not from heartbreak. Not from sadness.
But from the slow, horrifying understanding that I had been raising a fantasy of my son, not the truth of him. The truth was on my screen.
Cold. Simple. Sharp.
After a long minuter, maybe an hurry called Martha. She arrived faster than anyone her age should be able to move.
She didn't even take off her coat.
She looked into my face and must have seen everything she needed to know.
"Show me," she said.
So I turned the laptop toward her. Her jaw tightened the moment she saw Emily's name. She clicked through the tabs with the precision of someone who had already suspected much more than she wanted to say. "Liv," she whispered finally, "this wasn't an accident.
She planned this."
I shook my head slowly, still hoping there was some mistake. Maybe she linked something by accident. Maybe Matthew didn't know.
Maybe.
Martha cut me off gently but firmly.
"No, sweetheart.
She's been draining you for months. And Matthew, he may not be doing it himself, but he's letting her.
That makes him responsible." I covered my mouth with my hand.
Something inside me cracked, not loudly, not violently, but like an old floorboard giving way under years of quiet pressure. I had spent decades trying to be a good mother. I thought giving everything I had to my son was an act of love.
But I missed something fundamental.
People don't value what they don't earn. And I had given Matthew a life where nothing required earning. Martha placed her hand over mine, steady and warm. "Liv, you need to protect yourself before they take more. Before they take everything."
I let out a shaky breath. "Take more?"
"They already have the house. They have access to my accounts. What else could they possibly?"
Her expression darkened. "Your signature.
Your legal rights. Your entire estate, if you're not careful."
The kitchen spun around me for a moment.
I felt the weight of my years settle into my bones. But then something steadier rose beneath that fear.
I nodded slowly.
"All right. I'm done being naive." Martha squeezed my hand.
"We start today."
And just like that, the old Olivia, the one who stayed quiet, stayed small, stayed agreeable, slipped into silence. Not dead. Not gone. Just replaced. Replaced by a woman who finally understood that survival sometimes begins where love ends. That night, I didn't sleep.
Not a single minute.
I sat at the table in darkness, the glow of the laptop illuminating my face, scrolling through everything Emily touched, every dollar she moved, every lie I had believed. And with each new discovery, something inside me solidified. They thought I was weak because I was quiet. But they forgot something. Quiet women aren't weak.
We're observant.
We're patient. And once we decide to move,
we don't move halfway.
I closed the laptop at 2:17 a.m. And for the first time in years, I wasn't scared.
I was furious.
Determined. Awake. Tomorrow, I would call my financial advisor. Tomorrow, I would step into my lawyer's office. Tomorrow, I would start taking back everything they had assumed I'd never question.
Tonight, I sat alone in the dark and whispered to the stillness of my home.
They think I won't fight back. But oh, they don't know me at all. By the next morning, I still hadn't slept. My eyes felt heavy, my joints stiff, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years, like all the fog had burned away overnight. I moved through my house slowly, as if each step confirmed a new truth I had been too afraid to admit. I wasn't living in a home anymore. I was standing in a crime scene built from my own generosity.
I brewed coffee strong, bitter, the way Richard and I used to drink it. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, letting the heat calm the shaking in my fingers.
The sun wasn't fully up yet, but a pale light slid across the kitchen tiles, revealing something small on the floor near the front door. An envelope. Crisp. Tucked neatly under the doorframe. I felt a cold ripple crawl up the back of my neck. Emily always used those envelopes. I walked toward it slowly, like approaching something alive. My body knew before my mind did that whatever was inside would change everything. On top was a sticky note. Her handwriting was unmistakable, rounded loops, careful spacing, the kind of neatness someone uses when they want to appear kind. Just sign whenever you're ready, Mom. It'll make things easy for all of us while we're away. I didn't open it immediately. I stood in the entryway, staring at the handwriting, imagining her slipping it under my door sometime before dawn. Probably right before they left for the port. Maybe she even smiled while doing it. I carried the envelope to the kitchen table and sat down. The house around me was painfully quiet. Not peaceful quiet like a courtroom right before a verdict. Quiet like something waiting to be exposed. I opened the envelope. At first glance, the documents were clean and harmless: estate simplifications, emergency preparedness forms, household flexibility updates. The titles were vague enough to ease suspicion. Emily always was skilled at packaging control as convenience. But the more I read, the colder my blood felt. Buried in the middle, camouflaged between two generic update pages, was a full, permanent, irrevocable power of attorney. It granted Emily complete legal authority over my entire life. My finances. My home. My medical decisions. My assets. My retirement. Even my right to sign or refuse treatments. All of it handed to her, if I signed. At that moment, I realized something with bone-deep clarity. Emily wasn't planning for my future. She was planning to erase me while I was still breathing. The papers trembled slightly between my hands. I laid them flat on the table so I could read the fine print again and again, making sure I wasn't misinterpreting. But no very line said the same thing. Once signed, I would no longer exist as a legal adult. Emily would control everything. My heart didn't break. It hardened. Matthew, my son, either had no idea what she was doing, or worse, he did know, and he didn't care. The thought made my chest ache in ways I didn't know were still possible. I whispered his name once, the way I used to when checking on him while he slept as a child. Matthew. My sweet boy. My entire world. But he wasn't that boy anymore. And I had to stop pretending he was. I placed the unsigned papers back into the envelope, slid it closed, and pressed my palm over it. I wasn't shaking anymore. My breath had steadied. Something inside me was rearranging itself quietly, decisively. They thought they could move while I was alone. They thought slipping documents under my door while they sailed across the Pacific would guarantee my compliance. They thought age had softened my awareness. But age hadn't made me weak. Age had made me patient. I picked up my phone and called my attorney, Mr. Dalton. He answered on the second ring. Olivia? Everything all right? His tone was gentle, the kind professionals use with older clients if we might crack under pressure. But I didn't crack. No, I said. And I need you today. He didn't ask questions. That's why he'd handled my affairs for years. She trusted my instincts the way my own family never did. I drove to his office with the envelope on the passenger seat, my hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual. The Oregon sky was gray, a thin drizzle tapping the windshield. Streets were quiet. My town had no idea a storm had already broken loose inside one woman's home. When I walked into Dalton's office, he stood immediately, concern etched across his face. Olivia, you look pale. What happened? I didn't speak. I simply handed him the envelope. He read the documents silently. With every page he turned, His expression grew darker. When he reached the hidden power of attorney, he exhaled sharply and looked up at me. "This isn't help," he said. "This is predatory." I nodded. They wanted me powerless before they came back. He folded his hands. "Did you sign anything?" "No." "Good." His voice sharpened with purpose. "Then we still have the upper hand. But Olivia, this is serious. This is elder financial coercion. This could have ended with you committed against your will." I swallowed hard, but my voice came out steady. "I figured as much." He didn't waste time. He began laying out documents, flipping on legal pads, pulling up digital records. "We freeze every access. We reverse the house transfer. We revoke the previous powers of attorney. And Olivia need a paper trail of everything they've attempted." I leaned forward, hands clasped tightly. I already started gathering it. He gave me a loca mix of pride and concern. "Good," he said. "We'll move fast. Faster than they expect." For the next 3 hours, I sat with Dalton and reviewed every financial path Emily had touched. Every signature she'd slipped into documents. Every withdrawal she had masked under home expenses. Every clue that she had been preparing for this moment long before I ever saw it coming. By the end of it, I was exhausted but not defeated. There was a strength growing inside me, something sturdier than anger. Determination. When I finally left the office, drizzle had turned to steady rain. I walked slowly across the parking lot, letting the cold drops hit my face, grounding me. The envelope, now stuffed with copies and evidence, was tucked safely in my bag. It felt heavier than before, like it carried not just paper, but the weight of my awakening. My family may have underestimated me. But they were about to learn something they should have known all along. A quiet woman who finally decides to stand up is the most dangerous thing in the world. Leaving Dalton's office that day felt like stepping out of one world and into another. Not because anything around me had changed. The rain still clung to the gray Oregon sky, the air still smelled faintly of pine and wet pavement, but because something inside me was different. Something permanent. I wasn't drifting anymore. I wasn't waiting for someone else to do the right thing. I wasn't that soft, pliable woman who let family walk all over her. For the first time in years, I was steering my own life again. I drove home slowly, gripping the wheel tightly, my thoughts moving faster than my car. The windshield wipers brushed aside the rain in steady, rhythmic sweeps. Each one felt like clearing another layer of illusions I had wrapped around Matthew and Emily for so long. When I pulled into my driveway, I didn't get out immediately. I sat there, engine humming softly, staring at the house I'd lived in for nearly 3 decades. This home had watched me raise my son. It had held my marriage, my grief, my quiet victories. It had sheltered me through storms, literal and emotional. But now, looking at those familiar windows, the porch Richard once repaired with his own hands, the flower beds I tended every spring, all I felt was detachment. Not pain. Not longing. Just the quiet acknowledgement that once a home becomes a battleground, it never feels the same again. I stepped inside and locked the door behind me, a habit I never used to think much about. But today, the sound of the lock clicking felt symbolic, closing out the people who thought they could own me. The envelope Emily had slipped under my door still sat on the counter. I didn't touch it. It remained there like a monument to her arrogance. A reminder. A warning. A turning point. As I made myself a cup of tea, my mind drifted back to the private investigator Dalton recommended. Mr. Holden, a quiet, meticulous man who asked few questions and recorded everything. He'd already begun his audit earlier that morning, and I found myself hoping he would uncover every lie Emily had buried beneath her sweetness. I sat at the kitchen table and waited for his call, sipping tea that had gone cold long before the phone finally buzzed.
Mrs.
Gardner, he began, his tone calm but edged with urgency, I have some information you need to hear. I set the mug down gently, though my pulse quickened.
Tell me.
Your daughter-in-law started the pre-approval process for a second mortgage on the house they live in. The paperwork was filed last week. I closed my eyes, but it didn't soften the blow. Of course she did. Of course the house I gifted them wasn't enough, they wanted to squeeze it for money too.
Did she disclose that it was a gift?
I asked quietly. She described it as a family transfer done for estate purposes, Holden replied. Clean, straightforward, no mention of coercion or the power of attorney documents.
I rubbed my forehead. Matthew.
No signatures from him yet. But he's listed as co-owner. Meaning he didn't protest. Meaning he didn't question. Meaning he let her lead him into debt tied to a house that wasn't even truly theirs.
A fresh wave of cold resolve washed over me. Anything else?
I asked. There was a pause. A pattern of small withdrawals over several months, consistent, deliberate. And 2 larger transfers from your retirement account into an investment account under Emily's maiden name. My hands tightened around the phone.
Not shock.
Not disbelief.
Just confirmation, another nail in the coffin of the woman I used to be.
Thank you, I said softly.
Continue your work.
And keep everything documented. When I ended the call, I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I didn't even sit down. I simply walked through my house, room by room, absorbing every detail with new eyes. The drapes Emily once praised. The sofa Matthew helped me choose years ago. The quiet living room decorated with snapshots of a life that felt further and further away. I walked to the living room window and stood there for a long time. The rain outside had slowed to a drizzle, streaking the glass with thin, glistening trails. The whole neighborhood was wrapped in that soft, damp hush only Oregon could produce.
I pressed my palm lightly against the cold glass, feeling the subtle pulse of my heartbeat through it.
You tried to erase me, I whispered, not to anyone present, but to the ghosts of choices I'd made.
You thought I'd stay quiet forever.
But I had learned something valuable recently. When you stop giving to people who only take, they always reveal who they really are. I spent the next several hours preparing the final documents Dalton needed. It felt strange, empowering, and heartbreaking all at oncito, gather evidence against the very people I once considered my future. At one point, I found myself staring at an old photograph tucked between 2 fillets, a picture of Matthew when he was 6 years old, smiling with missing teeth, holding a popsicle in one hand and gripping my arm with the other. I traced his little face with my thumb. A face he no longer resembled.
What happened to you?
I whispered. But I already knew. I just didn't want to admit it. When the afternoon shifted into early evening, I sat down with a pen and my documents spread across the dining table. The rain outside stopped, leaving a thick stillness in the air. This was it.
The point of no return.
Dalton had everything ready for the house reversal filing. He could file it at dawn. And I had a decision to make. Would I sell the house, their house, before they returned from their cruise? Would I take back everything they had tried to steal? Would I reclaim the life they thought they owned? I didn't hesitate. Not anymore. I picked up my phone and called the realtor whose number I carried for emergencies I never expected to face.
Hi, this is Olivia Gardner, I said, voice steady.
I'd like to list a property immediately.
Cash buyers only. Fast turnaround.
Today if possible. She agreed without questions. She knew the market. She knew how fast Oregon homes could sell. And just like that, the first stone fell into place. The house would be sold. Their refinancing would collapse. Their plans would crumble. Their assumptions would cost them everything. And they wouldn't even know it until they returned and tried to unlock a door that no longer belonged to them. That night, as the sky grew darker and the cool air seeped into my living room, I allowed myself the smallest of smiles. They had gambled with my kindness. They had weaponized my trust. They had bet everything on the belief that I was too old to notice, too lonely to resist, too gentle to fight. But they forgot something essential. A woman who finds her strength late in life doesn't waste it. She wields it with precision. And I was only getting started. The morning they returned from their cruise, bronzed, relaxed, dripping with the kind of careless joy that only people who believe they own the world can carry, was the morning I felt the calmest I had felt in years. 4 days earlier, the house had been listed. 3 days earlier, the buyer had signed. 2 days earlier, closing had finalized. Yesterday, movers had packed the last remnants of my generosity. And today, the house Matthew and Emily believed was untouchable, theirs by entitlement and manipulation, belonged to a young newlywed couple who had no idea their home was built on a battlefield of betrayal. I arrived before sunrise. I parked 1 block away so they wouldn't see my car. The air held that crisp Oregon chill that sinks into your bones but wakes you more effectively than any caffeine.
I stood beneath a maple tree, hands tucked into my coat pockets, watching the silent street slowly brighten.
The moving vans were already in the driveway, their engines rumbling softly. A realtor stood with the new owners near the front door, a friendly young woman and her husband, laughing gently, pointing out some detail on the porch they loved. Their voices floated through the still morning air like a reminder that life continues, with or without you. I waited. And then their silver SUV turned the corner. Emily sat in the passenger seat wearing oversized sunglasses, her blonde hair pulled into a sleek bun. She looked like someone who had just stepped out of a resort spa. Matthew drove, his posture loose, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel to music I couldn't hear. The moment the car slowed near the driveway, I watched confusion etch itself onto Matthew's face. He blinked, leaned forward. Emily lifted her sunglasses slightly. Then she stiffened. Their expressions shifted from confusion to disbelief, to dawning dread. The new owners waved politely. The realtor smiled. The movers lifted boxes into the house. And I chose that moment to step forward. Matthew's eyes widened when he saw me crossing the street. "Mom," he said, stepping out of the SUV.
What is happening?"
Emily slammed her door shut, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement as she marched toward me like a storm wrapped in expensive perfume. "Why are there people in our house?" she snapped. "What did you do?
What have you done?"
I didn't raise my voice. I didn't hurry. I didn't cower the way she expected. "I told you," I said, each word steady, unshaking. "It's not your house." Matthew's face drained of color.
Emily's mouth twisted like a tightened rope.
"Don't play games with us," she hissed. "We have paperwork in progress. We have refinancing scheduled. I lifted a folder and placed it into Matthew's hands. "This is the only paperwork that matters now." He hesitated before opening it. But curiosity and fear tugged him forward. His fingers trembled slightly as he flipped through the pages. Then faster still.
The house reversal. The sale contract. The investigator's report.
Every unauthorized transaction Emily had processed. Every attempt to drain me.
Every manipulation.
Every breadcrumb of their scheme. Matthew swallowed hard. His voice came out thin.
"Emily, what is this?"
Emily snatched the folder from him and skimmed the documents with frantic eyes. I watched the exact moment reality slammed into her. Her shoulders stiffened, her breath hitched, her jaw clenched hard enough to ache from where I stood. These are taken out of context, she snapped.
You can prove anything. You forged this.
You must have. I didn't forge anything, I said softly.
But you did.
Her shoulders jerked. Matthew stared at her like he had never seen her before. Emily, he whispered, voice cracking, did you take money from her account? She turned on him as if he were the enemy now.
Don't you dare put this on me.
You knew we needed that money. You said she wouldn't care. She never cares. She gives us everything.
She is old, Matt.
She doesn't use half her accounts anymore. Each word was a confession she didn't realize she was offering freely. Matthew stepped back, stunned. I looked at him, not the grown man he had become, but the little boy I used to hold when he had nightmares. And I saw none of that child in his eyes now.
I saw a stranger.
I saw a man who let his wife turn his mother into a resource instead of a person. And I saw the exact moment he finally understood what silence can cost. Emily tried to recover. Tried to twist the narrative back into her favor. You think you've won? She spat at me. You think selling the house makes you powerful?
You think this Stund will make you happy? I shook my head.
That house was never supposed to be a weapon. But you made it one. So I took it away. You can't just cut us off, she shouted. We're family. I stepped closer, my voice quiet enough that she had to shut up to hear it. No, I said. You stopped being my family the moment you tried to erase me.
Emily's breath grew ragged.
She shook her head violently and gestured toward the house behind her. We had plans. We were building a future. That house was ours. That house, I interrupted, was mine to give.
And you abused the gift.
Matthew finally lifted his gaze. His voice was small. Mom, please, we can fix this. But I saw the same pattern I had seen for years. The guilt only arrived when the consequences did. Never before.
You sorry, I said softly, because you lost something. Not because you hurt me.
He didn't deny it. He couldn't.
Emily's desperation cracked further.
You'll end up alone, she snapped, grabbing Matthew's arm as if trying to pull him away from reality itself. When you're old and sick and broke, don't expect us to come crawling back to take care of you. I held her gaze. Being alone, I said gently, is a blessing compared to being used. Her face twisted into something ugly, an expression stripped of all the charm she used like bait. For the first time, the mask fell completely. And beneath it was a woman who believed she deserved everything she could take. I reached into my bag one last time and pulled out a second folder.
Thinner.
Sharper. I handed it to her. If you try to take me to court, I said, everything in that folder becomes public record. She grabbed it and flipped through it with jerky, frantic motions. Financial abuse. Forgery. Unauthorized access.
Coercive control.
Power of attorney fraud. Retirement account tampering. Signed copies of her updates slipped under my door. The color drained from her face. Matthew's shoulders slumped as though his bones had turned to dust. They both realized it at the same time. Everything they had built was crumbling. And they had done it to themselves. I took one step back, not in fear, but in finality. This ended the moment you decided my life was something to manage, I said quietly. I'm done being the person you step on.
Emily's voice cracked, turning shrill. You can do this. You don't get to destroy our life.
I didn't destroy it, I said.
You gambled with my trust.
And you lost. I turned away from them, the early morning light catching on the wet pavement as I walked toward the street.
Matthew called after me once.
"Mom." But I didn't turn around. The moment I stepped off that driveway, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. Freedom. Weight leaving my shoulders like wings opening. I walked to my car slowly, deliberately, breathing in the cold air as if it were the first breath of a new life. Behind me, I could hear Emily's voice rising, shaking, furious, unhinged, while Matthew stood motionless, holding the wreckage of his choices in his hands. For the first time, I didn't feel responsible for either of them. I drove home, not to a mansion, not to wealth, not to the life they thought I owed them, but to something better.
A life where no one controlled me. A life where no one stole from me. A life where silence was mine again.
Not because I was weak, but because I finally understood its power. When I finally reached my apartment, my own little place tucked behind an old cedar tree with peeling bark, I felt the kind of tired that sinks into your bones.
Not exhaustion.
Not defeat.
Something deeper. Something quieter.
A tiredness that comes after you've carried a burden for so long, you almost forget what life feels like without it. I pushed open my door and stepped inside. My apartment was modest, nothing like the home I once shared with Richard, nothing like the house I bought for Matthew, but it was mine. Entirely mine. The living room smelled faintly of lavender sachets, and the old hardwood floors creaked in their familiar rhythm, but the space felt warm, soft, and honest.
No manipulation hung in the air. No guilt seeped through the walls.
No one waited for me to fix anything. It felt peaceful. I placed my keys on the kitchen counter and sank into the chair near the window. Outside, children were playing somewhere down the block, their laughter rising and falling like a gentle melody. A dog barked in the distance. A neighbor's wind chime tinkled faintly in the cool Oregon breeze.
Simple sounds. Honest sounds.
Sounds that didn't want anything from me. It struck me then how rare that feeling had become, being in a space where nothing was expected of me.
I let out a long breath.
My phone buzzed on the table. At first, I ignored it.
I wanted one moment of stillness before letting the world in again.
But it buzzed again. And again. Until curiosity nudged my hand forward. I turned the screen over. 21 messages.
All from Matthew.
The first was desperate. "Mom, please answer." The second. "We need to talk."
Emily is furious.
"She's not thinking clearly." Then. "This looks worse than it is. We never meant to hurt you." Then. "I'm sorry. God, Mom, I'm sorry.
Please, just talk to me."
Buried near the end. I didn't know she was doing all of that. I swear. She told me it was normal. She said we were all merging finances. I didn't think. And finally.
"Mom, please don't leave us.
I'm begging you."
I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling nothing sharp, nothing explosive, just a quiet ache, like pressing on an old bruise. I typed nothing back.
Not because I hated him. Not because revenge tasted sweet. But because I finally understood something I had spent decades avoiding. You can love someone and still walk away. You can forgive someone and still close the door. You can grieve the family you thought you had while protecting the woman you became. I set the phone face down on the table. He wasn't messaging me because he missed me. He was messaging because he needed me. There is a differencia, painful one. I stood and walked toward the window. The sky was sliding into shades of rose and violet, the kind of Oregon sunset that looks painted by a tired artist.
I rested my hand against the cool glass, feeling the world outside humming gently against the quiet inside me.
For the first time in a very long time, I asked myself a question I had been too afraid to face.
What do I want?
Not what Matthew needed.
Not what Emily demanded.
Not what anyone expected from the good, reliable, self-sacrificing Olivia. Just me. My wants. My peace.
My life.
And the answer came without hesitation. I want time that belongs only to me.
I want a future without fear. I want dignity. I want freedom. I wasn't angry anymore.
I wasn't bitter.
I wasn't drowning in heartbreak.
What I felt was much simpler. Relief. Soft, warm relief, like stepping into a warm bath after years of standing in the cold. I walked around my apartment, touching small things that held quiet meaning. The photo of Richard and me on our trip to the Columbia River Gorge. The quilt I finished 2 winters ago. The little ceramic bird figurine I kept by the lamp. The mug with faded paint that said, "World's Best Mom." A gift Matthew gave me when he was 8. I didn't cry. I didn't crumble. I simply let those memories exist without drowning in them. My life was allowed to be more than my mistakes. More than my sacrifices. More than the people who used me. I made myself a cup of tea and sat on the couch. The steam curled into the air, carrying the scent of chamomile. I wrapped a blanket around my legs, settling into the quiet warmth of the room. No threats. No guilt.
No manipulation.
Just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the gentle ticking of the clock on the wall. It was in that stillness that a realization hit Menet with pain, but with clarity. I didn't lose my family. I lost the illusion of who I thought they were. And the truth, as painful as it was, set me free.
My phone buzzed again.
I didn't look. Instead, I whispered into the empty room, speaking a truth that had taken me nearly 70 years to understand. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Quiet means I finally have control. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let myself breathe. For once. For the first time in decades. My silence didn't belong to them. It belonged to me. And that was the greatest freedom of all.